How do you explain to a man's mother that her son saved 11 lives by doing the stupidest thing you've ever seen? That's what I've been trying to figure out for 80 years. Deacon couldn't have been more than 19. Farm kid from Nebraska who'd been with the platoon for 6 days. Didn't even know how to load the main gun properly. But when 10 German tanks had us pinned in that Belgian village, when our lieutenant was dead and our radio was shot to hell, when the rest of us were preparing to die in our steel coffin, Deacon did something so insane, so tactically backwards, that it shouldn't have worked. But it did work. For exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds, I know because I was watching the clock, praying we'd live long enough to see another minute tick by. Deacon crawled out of the tank hatch while we were still taking fire. Machine gun rounds snapping through the air, hitting cobblestones, brick walls, the hulls of burning tanks, dragging something heavy through the mud behind him. I watched through my periscope as he disappeared into the black smoke pouring from our burning lieutenant's tank, Morrison's tank, where 4 men had died in a single terrible second. Kowalski was crying, saying we had to go get him, but we couldn't move. Trapped between a stone wall and a drainage ditch, our traverse jammed solid. Panthers closing in from the east with their long 75mm guns. Then I saw what Deacon was doing, what he was actually trying to do, and my blood went cold. I'm 98 years old now. That was October 1944, and I still wake up wondering, did Deacon know what he was doing, or was it dumb luck dressed up like genius? Because what that kid accomplished in a shot-up Sherman with a jammed turret against 10 German tanks that outgunned us 3-1 shouldn't have been possible. The Army never put it in the after-action reports. History books don't mention it. So how did 5 green tankers and death traps survive what killed 3 veteran crews in 60 seconds? Belgium, October 18th, 1944. 703rd Tank Battalion, attached to the 1st Infantry Division, pushing through the Siegfried Line. We'd been issued M4 A1 Shermans 3 weeks prior. 30 tons of riveted steel that German tankers called Ronsons because we lit up on the first strike. I was a gunner, 22 years old, Bronx kid. Deacon was our assistant driver, bow gunner. He could only see a narrow slit of road directly ahead. That morning, when we rolled into that Belgian village, we thought we were chasing a retreating enemy. We were wrong. The Germans had set up Panthers and Panzer IVs hidden in farm buildings, waiting. 3 tanks gone in 90 seconds. The mission, advance through the village of Crucifix, yeah, that's really what it was called, and secure the road junction 2 clicks north. Intelligence said minimal resistance, no mention of armor, 5 Shermans in column formation. Lieutenant Morrison's tank led, then Sergeant, Williams and Charlie, then us, then Baker and Abel. The village was already burning when we entered, stone buildings with collapsed roofs, cobblestone streets slick with something that wasn't rain. Morrison's Tennessee drawl came through the radio. Straight through, no stops, watch the side streets. Deacon was hunched over the bow gun, probably terrified. He'd only been with us since Normandy, after the original crew got transferred out. Kid had farmer's hands, thick and calloused from working soil his whole life, and he wrote letters home every single night by candlelight. Kowalski liked him. Said Deacon reminded him of his younger brother back in Chicago. Same quiet way of watching everything. Same earnest face. The first explosion came from our left. Morrison's tank erupted. The whole front end peeled open like a tin can, metal screaming as it tore. No time to bail out. I was traversing when the second shot hit Charlie from the opposite direction. 88 millimeter. German tank gun. That sharp crack that means death traveling faster than sound. Williams tumbled out on fire, rolling in the street, his uniform burning. I can still see his hands reaching for nothing, trying to put out flames that wouldn't stop. Our commander, Sergeant Hayes, was screaming into the radio, "Georgia boy, steady as they come." But there was just panic now. Baker threw a track. Abel took a round through the engine. Through my periscope, I counted 6 German tanks, perfectly positioned. Panthers. We'd driven into a kill zone. Hayes tried to turn us around, but Baker blocked our escape. Stone wall on our right, burning Shermans ahead and behind. Then Deacon's voice came through the intercom, quiet, calm. "Sarge, I can see the one on the left, the Panther. He's reloading." How could he see that? But Deacon insisted. "His loader dropped a shell. We've got maybe 10 seconds. Hayes trusted him. "Gunner, traverse left. Fire when ready." But our traverse was jammed. We weren't shooting anyone. "Traverse is dead." The gun pointed northeast. Useless. Kowalski screamed about the engine redlining. The radio picked up fragments of other units calling for support that wasn't coming. Hayes made the call. "Kowalski, I need reverse." "Can't, Sarge. Baker's blocking us." 2 more Panthers rolled into position, guns tracking methodically. They knew we were trapped. Then Deacon opened his hatch, just popped it open. Hayes lost his mind. "Deacon, close that hatch." But the kid pulled himself halfway out. MG-42s ripped through the air, brick dust flying. Deacon just looked around, calm. Then he dropped back inside, grabbed the headset. "Sarge, Morrison's tank. Its gun is still intact." "Morrison's dead." "But his Sherman's pointed right at that Panther." Hayes said, "Kid, we can't use Morrison's gun." "I know," Deacon said. He grabbed rope from the floor, started crawling toward the hatch. Hayes tried to grab him, but the kid was gone, dropping onto the street where Williams had burned. I watched through my periscope as Deacon sprinted toward Morrison's burning tank. Full sprint across open ground. The Germans opened fire immediately. MG-42s, that buzzsaw sound. Bullets sparked off cobblestones all around him, stone chips jumping like hail. "He's not going to make it," Kowalski whispered. "Oh, God, he's not going to make it." But Deacon dove behind a pile of rubble, rolled, came up running, disappeared behind Morrison's tank where the smoke was thickest. Hayes tried raising other tanks on the radio. Nothing but static and distant voices calling for help that wasn't coming. We were the last mobile Sherman. Everyone else was burning or dead. The Panthers were repositioning, moving with that deliberate confidence of crews who know they've won. I could see the closest one's gun elevating, adjusting for our position. The gunner would be looking through his optics right now, laying the crosshairs on our front plate, calculating range and angle. "Where is he?" Hayes cracked his hatch, risking German sniper fire to spot Deacon through the smoke. Then Morrison's turret moved. Just a few degrees, but it moved. The gun tube, still attached to a dead tank, a burning tank full of Morrison's crew, traversed left. Slow, jerky, like something broken trying to work. "Is someone alive in there?" Kowalski asked, hope in his voice. "No," I said, because I had the angle. I could see into Morrison's commander's hatch. Nobody alive in that tank. Nobody who could be working that turret. The turret moved again. Slower this time, jerky, grinding metal on metal. Someone was manually cranking it, hand over hand, using the emergency traverse system. which was impossible. The manual traverse on a Sherman turret takes 2 men and about 1,000 cranks to rotate even a few degrees. Your arms burn, your back screams, and you need someone else to spell you every 30 seconds. Unless you were desperate, unless you were 19 and stupid and refusing to give up. Hayes understood. He's inside Morrison's tank, hand cranking the turret. His voice was quiet, awed. The closest Panther fired. I saw the muzzle flash, bright orange in the gray smoke, saw the shot coming, knew with absolute certainty it would punch through our front plate and kill all of us. The round hit Morrison's tank instead, passed through the already destroyed hull with a shriek of tearing metal, missed Deacon by inches, but the impact jarred Morrison's gun. The barrel shifted, now pointed almost directly at the Panther, and Morrison's .75 fired. The shell must have been chambered when Morrison died, just sitting there in the breech waiting. The firing pin must have been cocked. Somehow, Deacon found the trigger. The recoil rocked the entire burning tank backward 6 inches. The tracer round arced across the street, glowing orange, and I watched it strike the Panther's turret ring where the armor was thinnest. Sparks, smoke, metal fragments flying. The German tank's turret jammed solid, the drive ring destroyed. Crews started bailing out, hatches flying open. Deacon had just killed a Panther from inside a corpse's Sherman. "Get back here!" Hayes screamed, but Deacon couldn't hear. The kid was already moving, dragging an ammunition can toward Charlie's tank. That's when I understood. We had 5 destroyed tanks, 5 guns still working, pointing different directions, and Deacon was going to use every single one. "He's weaponizing dead tanks," I said. Hayes stared at me, face black with soot. Then he started laughing, this high, hysterical sound. "That crazy son of a bitch." The Germans understood too, but too late. They focused fire on the destroyed Shermans, but Deacon was already inside Charlie's tank. Turret moving, grinding. "Kowalski," Hayes said, suddenly calm, "give me 30 seconds of forward movement." "Engine's cooked, Sarge. We move, we might throw a rod." "I don't care. 30 seconds." The engine roared, screamed, metal grinding. We lurched forward. My traverse wheel freed up. "I've got rotation." I spun the wheel. "Target Panther, 2 o'clock." The German tank was focused elsewhere. I laid the reticle on its side armor and fired. The shot hit low. The Panther slewed sideways. Mobility kill. Then Charlie's gun fired. Deacon had gotten it working. The round went wild, but made the Germans realize they were taking fire from multiple positions, from tanks they thought were dead. They started retreating. Deacon moved between tanks like a ghost. I fired every time my loader could ram a shell home. Then I saw movement in Abel's tank. Someone was alive. Patterson, the loader. He was manning his gun while Deacon worked the traverse. 2 Americans, 50 yards apart, coordinating fire from 2 dead tanks, fighting a platoon of German armor. It shouldn't have worked. But Deacon had created something the Germans weren't prepared for. A distributed weapons system made of corpses and desperation. A Panther rushed our position. Kowalski kept our dying engine running. I fired 3 rounds. Miss, hit. The third punch through. It brewed up. Deacon emerged from Abel's tank, limping badly, bleeding. I watched him stumble, catch himself on Baker's fender, pull himself up. He was going for one more gun, even though he could barely stand. Hayes said something I'll never forget. "That kid's either going to win the Medal of Honor or die in the next 10 seconds. Baker's turret moved. The gun elevated, traversed, fired at a Panzer IV trying to flank us. direct hit. That's when the Germans broke. They'd lost 7 tanks. They withdrew, conceding the field. The silence after combat is worse than the noise. Your ears ring so badly you can't hear your breathing. Everything smells like burned metal and cordite and blood and things you don't want to think about. And you're shaking, really shaking, because your body is finally catching up to what you survived, to how close death came. Hayes was out first, running toward Baker's tank where we'd last seen Deacon. I followed, my legs barely holding me up, knees threatening to buckle. Kowalski stayed with our tank. The engine had seized completely, smoking and ticking as it cooled. We found Deacon sitting behind Baker's tank, back against the road wheel, covered in mud and blood. He'd been hit twice, machine gun rounds through his calf and left arm. He was trying to wrap his arm with torn shirt, but his hand shook too badly to tie the knot. Blood soaked through the fabric. "Stay still," Hayes said, dropping beside him, hands already working on the bandage. "Medic! We need a medic." But there was no medic. The medic had been in Morrison's tank. I looked around at the street. 5 destroyed American Shermans, hulls torn open, still smoking. 7 destroyed German tanks scattered across the cobblestones, bodies in the street. Williams burned beyond recognition. Morrison's entire crew still inside their tank. Baker's driver slumped dead in his seat. Patterson stumbled over from Abel's tank, blood running down his face from a head wound, eyes wide with shock. "Who was that?" he asked, pointing at Deacon with a shaking hand. "Who the hell was that firing from my turret?" Deacon looked up at us exhausted, confused, like he was waking from a dream. "I just kept thinking those guns still worked. Morrison's gun still worked. Seemed a waste to not use them." Hayes sat down next to Deacon in the mud and shook his head slowly. "Kid, you just destroyed 7 German tanks using 5 dead American tanks. Do you understand how insane that is?" Deacon thought about it, breathing hard through pain. 7. I think I got 7. There was one behind the church, but I'm not sure if I hit it or Baker's gun misfired. We checked. He'd hit it. 7 German tanks, 1 farm kid from Nebraska, 6 days in combat. They evacuated Deacon 30 minutes later when the relief column arrived, strapped him to a Jeep hood, and raced him to the aid station. I never saw him again after that. The 743rd pushed through Crucifix that afternoon, secured the road junction by evening. The German defensive line that should have held us for 3 days collapsed in 6 hours because their armor support had been decimated by a kid who shouldn't have been able to do what he did. Hayes wrote Deacon up for the Distinguished Service Cross. Battalion commander downgraded it to a Silver Star. I don't think Deacon ever got it. Paperwork disappeared in 1944. The after-action report mentioned effective use of indirect fire support without explaining what that meant. The rest of us stayed in the line, got a replacement tank 2 days later, fought through the Siegfried Line into Germany all the way to the Elbe. Kowalski made it home, opened a garage in Chicago, died in 1987. Hayes died in February 1945, killed by a mine outside Cologne. Never saw his 27th birthday. I took shell fragments in the shoulder near the Rhine, spent the rest of the war in an English hospital. I found out what happened to Deacon in 1947, wrote to his family, got a letter from his sister. He'd survived his wounds, made it home in early 1945, went back to farming, married his high school sweetheart in 1946, had 4 kids, 11 grandchildren, worked the same land his grandfather homesteaded, Died in 2003, age 78, from cancer. Peaceful, his daughter said, surrounded by family. He never talked about the war. His wife said he'd wake up sometimes, middle of the night, and she'd find him on the porch, staring at nothing. But he'd never told her what he was seeing. Those 4 kids? One became a teacher, taught history for 35 years. One joined the Peace Corps, built schools in Guatemala. The other 2 stayed on the farm, raised their own families. All those grandchildren, great-grandchildren now. None of them would exist if Deacon had stayed in our tank. Morrison had no children. He was 23, engaged to a girl in Tennessee. Williams had a pregnant wife. His son grew up without knowing his father. If Deacon hadn't done what he did, none of those future lives would have existed. Patterson's kids. Kowalski's garage that employed 20 men over 40 years. I've thought about that day every October for 80 years. Tried to make sense of it. Tried to understand how a farm kid with 6 days of combat experience outsmarted veteran German tank crews using weapons that didn't belong to him, attached to tanks that were already dead. I don't have an answer. Maybe desperation makes you creative. Maybe Deacon saw possibilities the rest of us were trained to ignore. Maybe it was just dumb luck, and we've spent 8 decades pretending it was genius because the alternative is too terrifying to accept. What I know is this. Morrison's gun still worked. Charlie's gun still worked. Abel's and Baker's guns still worked. Deacon saw that. The rest of us saw wreckage. We saw what we'd lost. He saw what we still had. Sometimes I wonder if Deacon remembered it the way I do. If he woke up on those nights his wife talked about and saw Morrison's burning tank, or Williams rolling in the street, or the way that Panther's turret jammed when his desperate shot hit home, I hope he didn't. I hope he remembered the harvest instead, and his kids' laughter, and the feeling of soil in his hands. I hope he got to forget. But I can't. I'm 98 years old, and I can still smell the cordite when it rains. I can still hear Hayes laughing in the mud next to a bleeding teenager who just done the impossible. I can still see those 7 German tanks burning in a Belgian street, killed by a ghost crew and one crazy kid who refused to waste good guns. Morrison, Williams, Hayes, Baker's driver whose name I can't remember anymore, and that shames me. They deserve better than burning in a Deathtrap Sherman in a village nobody remembers. But because of Deacon, some of us got to go home.